The rainy night bus, Los Angeles. The rain had started hours ago. It wasn't the kind of Los Angeles drizzle that made you reach for a hoodie and keep walking. This was different, steady, drumming, unrelenting. Each droplet tapped against bus stop signs and slicked the sidewalks with liquid reflections. The city, for once, wasn't buzzing. It was breathing. Quiet, gray, tired, somewhere just off Sunset Boulevard, under the dull orange glow of a flickering street lamp, the 482 night line pulled up with a wheeze of brakes and a sigh like it had lived a long life of regrets. The driver, a middle-aged man with salt at his temples and a scar just under his eye, opened the door with a metallic groan. A woman stepped on first. Late 30s. Hair soaked, but not hurried. She dropped $2 crumpled into the fare box without looking up. Behind her, a man with a duffel bag over his shoulder hesitated, then boarded, his boots wet and heavy. The smell of rain, old upholstery, and weary hearts mixed in the air. Tonight, this wasn't just a bus. It was a shelter for the in-between, the people caught between the place they had to leave and the one they couldn't quite reach. The woman, her name was Elise, slid into a seat halfway down the aisle. Her hands were trembling, but she didn't shiver. She wasn't cold. She was haunted. By what? Even she hadn't figured it out yet. A photograph inside her coat pocket, creased, faded, showing a boy with a chipped tooth smiling beside a Ferris wheel, kept poking her ribs like it wanted her attention. 3 seats behind her sat the man with the duffel. He watched the rain carve ghostly paths down the bus windows. His name was Marco, though he hadn't spoken it out loud in days. Not since leaving that voicemail his brother never returned. He clutched the bag like it held the last pieces of who he used to be, before the fire, before the blame, before Los Angeles swallowed his name. The bus continued through Koreatown, past shuttered taco joints and liquor stores still glowing behind thick bars. A teenage girl got on next, headphones blaring something sad and beautiful. She looked no older than 16, and her eyes had that unspoken wariness of someone who learned too young that adults often mean danger. The driver didn't ask questions. No one did. That was the rule on the rainy night bus. You don't ask, and you don't answer. Every stop brought someone new. A man in a hospital gown under a trench coat. A woman carrying a box of ashes like it was made of gold. An old couple arguing in Spanish, then laughing through their tears. Each one entered as if they'd been summoned by the storm. As the city blurred past, its neon lights warped in puddles, the bus became its own world. An island drifting through fog and memory. Elise kept glancing at her reflection. Not at herself, but at what used to be her. She could still remember the scream. The way the glass had shattered. Her son's small hand slipping from hers in the moment that changed everything. She hadn't meant to leave the hospital that night. But grief does strange things. It whispers to you in alleyways. It calls you down streets you've never walked before. And when the rain began, Elise let it take her. Maybe she thought the city would wash her clean. Maybe she was just looking for someone else's sadness to drown in. Marco finally unzipped the duffel. Inside wasn't money. Wasn't drugs. It was a uniform. LAPD. Retired. Folded carefully, wrapped around a set of keys and a badge he hadn't turned in. He wasn't proud of the way things had ended. That one case, the one they buried in paperwork and told him to forget. But he couldn't. A girl had gone missing. The wrong man took the fall. Marco had tried to speak up once. He was silenced twice. After that, silence became a routine, and yet, here he was. On the 482. Heading nowhere, the girl with headphones looked over at Elise. "You okay, lady?" she asked. Elise smiled faintly. "No," she said. "But I think that's why I'm here." The girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. She handed Elise one of the earbuds. A soft melody, violin and distant thunder, poured into her ear. Elise didn't cry. But she let the music fill the space where her pain used to echo. The bus hit a stretch of road lined with old movie theaters, their marquees broken, forgotten. The rain softened to a whisper. The city exhaled. At 3:12 a.m., the bus stopped at Alvarado. A man in a suit got on. His tie undone, his eyes red. A plastic bag in one hand, a broken engagement ring in the other. He took a seat beside Marco and didn't speak. They sat in silence until Marco said, "Some nights, you just need to ride until the world feels far away." The man nodded. "Divorce?" Marco asked. The man shook his head. "Left her at the altar. Not because I didn't love her. Because I knew I couldn't be the man she needed." Marco leaned back, looking up at the flickering ceiling light. "You did what she couldn't." Somewhere near Boyle Heights, the teenage girl got off. She waved at Elise before vanishing into the dark, hoodie pulled tight. Elise watched her go. She wondered if the girl had a place to sleep. Then she realized, the bus had become her place. For people who couldn't go home. At 4:07 a.m., the driver pulled over near Union Station and turned in his seat. "This is where I get off," he said, his voice gravel and fatigue. "Who's driving now?" asked the man in the suit. The driver smiled. "The bus knows the way." They laughed, not because it was funny, but because it made the pain feel human. He stepped off, coat pulled up, walking slowly into the drizzle, but the bus didn't stop moving. It drove on, unchained, unburdened. The city was beginning to stir. The streetlights blinked. The first signs of dawn peeked through the clouds. Marco stood up and walked to the front. He looked at the road, then at the passengers, Elise with her photo, the man with the ring, a young barista asleep in the back, a jazz musician humming a tune no one had heard before. "I think this ride's for us," he whispered, "for the lost ones. The night drifters. The souls with unfinished pages." He turned to Elise. "You still holding on to him?" he asked. Elise looked down. "I think I'm finally letting go." "Good," Marco said. "That's how you find your way back." The bus curved down Wilshire, slower now, as if the road were winding into a dream. No one asked for stops. No one pulled the cord, they just rode, letting the night cradle them. Letting the rain soften their edges. Los Angeles, for a moment, became a place where pain was shared, not hidden, and the bus, just a metal shell under a stormy sky, became something else entirely. A confession booth. A chapel. A place where ghosts found passengers to talk to. Or maybe it was just a bus, just another rainy night, but to the ones inside, it was the one place that understood. And sometimes, that's all a heart needs, even in Los Angeles, even in the rain, even on the 482 night line. The last bus to Echo Park. The rain was relentless. Not the kind that tiptoes across rooftops like a lover in the night, but the kind that crashes down with a fury, drowning every quiet street and neon light in a blur of shimmering water. It was past midnight in Los Angeles, and the city, usually buzzing, was hushed under the storm's breath. Only the humming of distant traffic, the occasional flash of lightning, and the wet thud of raindrops filled the silence. At a nearly forgotten metro stop on Sunset Boulevard, a bus wheezed to a halt, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain like twin blades. Number 217. Headed to Echo Park, inside the dim bus shelter, a woman stood alone. She was soaked, despite the overhang, her dark coat clinging to her figure and a paper-wrapped parcel clutched tightly in both hands. Her name was Mara, and she hadn't meant to be out this late. But life had a way of dragging her through long nights and longer regrets. The driver, an older man with silver hair and an eye that watched too carefully, cracked the door open. "You getting on?" he asked without expression. She nodded once, stepped inside, and the door hissed shut behind her. There were only two other passengers, an elderly man near the back, murmuring to himself, and a teenage boy in a hoodie with headphones, head lolling against the fogged-up window. Mara moved halfway down the aisle and sat quietly, eyes flickering toward the driver's mirror. He didn't look back. The bus pulled into motion with a groan. Outside, Los Angeles dripped with mystery. Street lamps stretched their light like golden fingers across puddled sidewalks. Buildings loomed like forgotten memories, their windows dark, their signs flickering half alive. Mara clutched the parcel tighter. She told herself it was just a delivery. Just a favor. A drop-off at an address in Echo Park. But her hands trembled slightly, and the paper was beginning to wilt under the moisture from her sleeves. She had been told not to open it, but she had been told a lot of things in her life. Don't fall in love with a man on parole. Don't believe in second chances. Don't trust a package wrapped in silence and given in haste. The driver coughed once, deep, guttural, and a little too loud. It made the boy in the hoodie stir. The bus rattled as it climbed into the hills. Rain streaked the windows like tears. At the next stop, no one waited. But the bus opened its doors anyway. For a moment, the storm tried to rush inside. Wind and water. And something else. Then the doors hissed shut, the lights inside flickered once. Mara's phone buzzed in her pocket. You almost there, the message read. No name. Just the number. She didn't reply. She stared at the parcel. It was tied with red string, an old-fashioned knot. A slip of paper peeked from beneath the folds. It had started to smudge. Do not open until you arrive. The bus turned sharply, climbing higher. The old man in the back coughed. Mara looked up. He was staring at her now. You shouldn't have taken it, he rasped. Mara blinked. Excuse me. The package, he said. That's not yours to carry. I don't know what you're talking about. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile, as if he'd already seen this moment 100 times. You will. The bus creaked around a bend. Trees leaned toward the street like they were trying to listen. The city below shimmered through the fog, a galaxy of soaked lights, distant and unreachable. Mara's phone buzzed again. Do not speak to anyone on the bus. Especially the old man. Her chest tightened. She looked up slowly. The old man had vanished. His seat was empty. The teenage boy had his headphones in again, nodding to something unheard. Mara stood slowly and moved toward the back. No old man. No trace he'd ever been there. The parcel in her hands felt heavier now. She sat back down, heart hammering. Lightning flashed outside. The driver glanced into the mirror. You okay back there? She opened her mouth to reply, and stopped at the reflection of the rearview mirror. There was someone in the back. A figure. Watching her. Still as stone, but when she turned around, nothing. The bus rolled on. Echo Park, the sign said. 2 miles. Her phone buzzed again. Do not turn around. Whatever you do. Her breath hitched. She pressed her back against the seat. A whisper tickled her ear. Too late. The lights inside flickered. The teenage boy took off his headphones, frowning. What the? The driver slammed the brakes. The bus screamed to a halt in the middle of the empty street. Everything went still. No rain. No wind. No sound. Mara looked around. She was alone. Everyone was gone. Driver. Boy. Old man. Gone. Only the package remained in her lap. Dry now. Untouched, she reached for her phone. No signal. Her breath fogged the glass as she peered outside. The bus wasn't on Sunset anymore. It was parked on a narrow road, overlooking the lake at Echo Park. Street lamps dead. The water glimmered under a sky that had no moon. A figure stood just outside the door. Mara didn't want to move. But something inside her shifted. She clutched the parcel and stood. The doors opened on their own. Rain fell in silence. The figure stepped forward. It was a man. Drenched. Pale. Familiar. Her heart stopped. David? He looked just like he had the night he died, the night he had left, driving home in the rain. She had screamed at him. Said awful things. The phone rang hours later. Crash. Fire. Gone. Now he stood in the rain, looking like a ghost who hadn't moved on. You brought it, he whispered, eyes on the parcel. She couldn't speak. You opened it, didn't you? Mara looked down. The string was untied. She hadn't remembered doing it. But the parcel had come undone. Inside was a photograph. Charred on the edges, their wedding photo. Burned. Wet. But still whole. David looked at her with sorrow. You weren't supposed to open it. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I waited. All this time. For you to forgive me. Or maybe for you to forgive yourself. Rain washed down her face like tears. Where am I? She asked as he stepped back. You'll know soon. The sky cracked open with thunder, and the bus door closed. Everything vanished in a blink. She woke up at the stop in Echo Park. Alone, dry, the parcel gone, her phone buzzed, message delivered. Thank you. No sender. She stood, breathless, beneath a street lamp. The rain was gone. The streets were empty. She turned and began to walk, unsure if what had happened was real, but something inside her felt lighter, some burden, gone. The last bus had taken more than her time, that it had taken her grief, and maybe, just maybe, returned a piece of herself. The last stop on Crescent Hill, the rain had returned, angry, relentless, and unapologetically loud. It beat down on the metal roof of the number 86 night bus like a drum mourning its own heartbeat. The windshield wipers clattered rhythmically as the driver squinted through the downpour, guiding the old vehicle up the winding incline of Crescent Hill. Los Angeles looked nothing like the one in glossy travel brochures tonight. This wasn't palm trees and neon dreams, it was soaked pavement, broken umbrellas on bus stops, and forgotten passengers with nowhere else to go but forward. Ava was the only one on the bus when it left downtown. She sat in the back corner, face partially hidden beneath the hood of a soaked hoodie, headphones in, though no music played. Her fingers clenched tightly around a folded newspaper clipping. The edges were worn, nearly disintegrated. The headline read, "Famous photographer found dead on Crescent Hill." Dated exactly 1 year ago tonight, the driver, a gray-haired man named Ray, glanced at her through the overhead mirror. He'd driven this route 20 years, and he'd learned to tell when someone wasn't just taking a ride. They were running from something, or toward it. "You sure you want to ride all the way up?" he called back gently as the bus rolled past sunset and began climbing. Ava didn't look up. Just nodded. "Yeah. I need to get off at the last stop." Ray gave a slow, resigned nod. "All right then. Last stop it is." Outside, the storm seemed to close in tighter as they passed abandoned gas stations, forgotten diners, and shuttered motels. A strange quiet settled over the world beyond the foggy windows, as if the city itself were holding its breath. At the third stop, a tall man in a soaked trench coat stepped on. His face was obscured by a fedora shadow, and he smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and riverbanks. He didn't say a word. Just tapped his bus card and sat 2 rows in front of Ava. She stiffened slightly, the bus jolted forward. Ray noticed the tension. "You two okay back there?" he asked. The man turned slightly, revealing a long scar down his cheek. "Just a ride, driver. That's all." Ava clenched the newspaper tighter. Another mile passed. Ava could feel her heart beating too fast. She'd spent the last year piecing together stories, rumors, whispers of a camera that could trap a soul, of a man who'd never taken a photo that didn't come true, and the night he tried to destroy the camera, he fell, some say jumped, from the top of Crescent Hill. The man 2 rows ahead had a leather bag beside him. And Ava had seen the same scar in a photo once, one taken by her father, the famous photographer, dead. But maybe not alone. "Why did you do it?" she whispered, barely audible over the rain. The man didn't turn. "You shouldn't have come looking. You killed him." "No," the man said. He saw something he wasn't supposed to. The lights inside the bus flickered as they reached the edge of the hill. Ray cursed softly. "Not now." The bus slowed. The last stop was near. The man stood and turned, his eyes cold but not cruel. "You think revenge is what you need. But that's not what's waiting up there." Ava stood too. "He was my father. And he chose to die rather than let the truth out." Ray pulled the bus over at the top of Crescent Hill. The stop was barely lit, and the rain blurred the city skyline below into a trembling sea of lights. "Last stop," Ray said softly. Ava stepped off. So did the man. The bus drove off, its red taillight swallowed by fog. The two of them stood in silence by the iron railing where the cliff dropped steeply into the dark. This is where he fell, Ava said. Right here. No, the man corrected. This is where he jumped, after he burned every negative, every frame, every truth he ever captured. Ava opened her bag and pulled out a single photo. It showed her father, the man beside her, and a strange blur in the background, almost humanoid, almost light. I found this in a hidden compartment, she said. He didn't burn all of them. The man's hand twitched. You don't understand, he said. It's not just a photograph. It's a door. Lightning flashed, behind them, something shimmered, no sound, no form, just an ache in the air. A vibration. Where is the camera now? He asked slowly. I have it, Ava whispered. Then you're already marked. The thing behind them grew clearer. A woman made of light and water. Eyes like shattered glass. She hovered above the pavement, expression unreadable. Ava turned to face it. I want answers. The thing hovered closer, its voice like broken film reels. Truth is not what you seek, child of vision. Truth costs everything. The man stepped between them. You don't get to take her. The woman smiled, and with a flicker, he vanished, gone, like vapor. Ava screamed, and then the camera in her bag grew hot. She dropped to her knees, tears blending with rain. I'm not like him, she whispered. I'm not afraid. She raised the camera, pointed it at the being. .1 flash, and silence. When Ava looked up, she was alone. No ghost. No man, just the whisper of wind and the wet kiss of rain. The photo in her hand was blank, but something had changed. She could feel it in her bones. She was the last stop now, and the truth, it wasn't out there anymore. It was inside her. If you've ever taken the night bus through Crescent Hill, you might have seen a girl sitting alone with an old camera. If you do, don't sit too close. Sometimes, the past doesn't want to be photographed, it wants to be lived again. The rainy night bus, Wilshire. Let's begin. It was past midnight when the rain finally turned from mist to storm. Water raced down the glass of the aging bus, streaking the outside world into blurry watercolors, neon signs, passing headlights, and the occasional umbrellaed silhouette. Inside, the cabin was half-lit and mostly empty. The driver, old Jerome, kept the heater low, the engine purring as if aware of the silence it carried. This was the Wilshire line, the last ride of the night, and it was never just a ride. A woman stepped in at Sepulveda. She was soaked through, trench coat darkened by rain, eyes distant. Her name was Aileen. No one else noticed her, except for an older man in the second row, Mr. Barlow. He nodded once, as if recognizing a familiar ache in her step. She sat halfway down, near the emergency exit. The bus lurched back onto the wet road. Behind her, a quiet figure stirred. A teenager. Hoodie pulled low, shoes squeaking softly as he shifted. His name was Remy, and tonight, he carried more than a bag of clothes. He carried the weight of a broken home. Aileen didn't look at him, Remy didn't speak, but the bus saw them both. A few stops later, the doors hissed open near Koreatown. A man in a crisp business suit stepped aboard, drenched but composed. His name was Darian Cole. His tie was loosened. His briefcase, missing. His wedding ring, absent. He scanned the bus and chose a seat across from Aileen. Rain tapped harder on the roof now. A kind of rhythm. The driver glanced up in the rearview mirror and then back at the road. The passengers rode in silence, but the silence was not empty. Somewhere between Vermont and Alvarado, the lights flickered. No one said a word, not the girl who had just boarded with a violin case strapped to her back, not the older couple holding hands like survivors of a shipwreck, not even the man at the very back who hadn't moved since Echo Park. Only Aileen turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing at the ceiling as if the bus itself had whispered something. Every person on that ride was running, from something or to something. Remy stared at his lap, fists clenched. Aileen kept glancing at her phone, screen dark. Darian's eyes were fixed on the wet blur outside. The girl with the violin whispered a tune only she could hear, and the man in the back. He hadn't blinked in 20 minutes, then the bus did something strange. It stopped, but not at a scheduled stop. No one moved. The street outside was a dead-end alley, dark, unfamiliar, wrong. Jerome didn't explain that, he simply turned the bus off. In that moment, the rain became deafening. Remy was the first to stand. This isn't Wilshire. Jerome didn't answer. Where are we? Aileen asked, slowly rising. Jerome looked at her through the mirror. Sometimes the last bus doesn't take you where you want. Just where you need. Darian scoffed. This is absurd. But the doors opened with a hiss, revealing not the city, but a narrow corridor of street lamps that flickered with a soft hum. They looked at each other, and then the man from the back finally stood. His coat was soaked, his eyes were hollow. I've written this line for years, he said. This only happens when the bus is full of regrets. One by one, they followed, down the steps, into the mist, into a part of Los Angeles no map had ever shown. What happened next? That's the thing about the rainy night bus. Sometimes it drives you home, sometimes it drives you back in time, sometimes it lets you face the one thing you've been avoiding your entire life, and sometimes, if you're lucky, it lets you rewrite one moment, just one dot before dawn. The rainy night bus, Los Angeles. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten louder. As if the sky had something to say but couldn't find the words, so it just poured its silence over the city. Hour after hour, the bus rolled forward, the hum of the engine a low whisper beneath the rhythm of the falling rain. By now, there were only 3 passengers left: the girl with the scarf who hadn't spoken a word since Wilshire, the man in the trench coat who kept clutching a folder to his chest like it was full of sins he couldn't confess, and Eli. Eli had been on this bus for too long, he thought. But maybe that was the point. That he glanced at the rearview mirror. The driver, an older man with silver temples and tired eyes, met his gaze briefly. Not a word was spoken, but something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or the quiet knowledge that both of them had long outlived the places they once called home. Crenshaw and Jefferson. The driver called out. The girl didn't move. The man in the trench coat stirred, looked out the fogged window, then sat back down. His hand trembled. The folder shook. Eli leaned slightly forward. You okay? The man looked at him with hollow eyes. This city remembers everything, he muttered. Even when you try to forget. Then, without another word, he pulled the cord. The bus hissed to a stop. He walked out slowly into the rain, without an umbrella, without looking back. The door closed behind him. Now it was just the girl and Eli, and the driver, and the rain. Why do you ride this bus so late? Eli finally asked the girl. She didn't answer. But after a long silence, she lifted her head and said, because no one knows where I am when I'm on it. Eli nodded. That made a strange kind of sense. In a city where everyone wanted to be seen, sometimes the safest place was where no one was looking. They passed beneath another flickering street lamp. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, long and aching. The driver said, softly, next stop's the end of the line. Eli looked out the window. They were somewhere near the edge of the city now. Where the lights got sparse and the buildings gave way to shadows and silence. You get many people riding all the way? Eli asked. The driver didn't answer right away. Then, only the lost ones. Eli chuckled. I guess I qualify. But the driver shook his head. You're not lost. You're just waiting. Eli turned to him. For what? For something to make you stop running. The girl stood then. Pulled the cord. I'll get off here, she said quietly. Eli watched her walk to the front, her scarf trailing behind her like a memory. As the door opened, she turned slightly. Thank you, she whispered, though it wasn't clear to whom she was speaking. The rain swallowed her. Now it was just Eli, and the driver, and the road. I think I'll stay on, Eli said, half to himself. The driver didn't object. He just drove. Past the ghost-lit gas stations. Past the shuttered diners. Past the broken pieces of dreams littered across old intersections. Eli leaned his head against the glass, and for the first time in a long while, he closed his eyes, and in the rhythm of the engine, in the hush of the tires over wet asphalt, in the whispered lullaby of the city that never sleeps but often forgets, he let go. Just for one night, the rain kept falling. The bus rolled forward, a solemn whisper gliding through the drenched streets of Los Angeles. Neon signs shimmered on the pavement, refracted and distorted by the rain pooling in fractured puddles. Inside, the air was thick with silence, except for the occasional creak of the seat or the groan of the windshield wipers. Only a few passengers remained now. Most had departed, vanishing into the wet blur of the city. But the energy aboard hadn't lightened. It had deepened. Rosa sat by the window, her reflection barely visible in the glass, damp curls clinging to her cheeks, eyes distant. She hadn't meant to ride this far. She never did. But something about tonight, the weight in the air, the driver's eyes in the mirror, the strangers who seemed a little too familiar, it all pulled her deeper into the route, stop after stop, as if the city wanted her to stay moving. A man in a trench coat coughed behind her. Another, the one in the military jacket with trembling fingers, sat 3 rows up, tapping out something on a notepad with hands too scarred to hold a pencil steady. And near the back, a teenage girl with headphones stared at nothing, lips mouthing words that didn't match the music playing softly in her seat. The driver hadn't spoken in over an hour, and then, the lights flickered, just once. Just long enough to be noticed. Not long enough to be alarming. Rosa looked up. The driver's face in the overhead mirror was blank. Not tired. Not frustrated. Just absent. Like he was no longer really there. And the bus? It didn't slow. Didn't pause at the next stop. Just kept gliding, bypassing a waiting couple beneath a broken umbrella who shouted and waved. No one else on the bus seemed to notice, or maybe, Rosa thought, they were pretending not to. She glanced at the timetable posted near the emergency exit. The bus shouldn't even be running this route past midnight. She checked her phone. No signal. Battery at 23%. Her thumb hovered over the lock screen, then retreated. The bus passed an intersection she recognized. La Brea and 8th. But something was wrong. The building on the corner was boarded up, burned out, blackened. But, she'd been past it just yesterday. It had been open. Bright. A bakery. She looked again. No bakery, just a hollowed husk, soot licking up the bricks like smoke stains frozen in time. She turned to the girl in headphones. Did you see that? Rosa asked. The girl didn't move. Didn't blink. Rosa leaned in. The building. It's, and then the girl looked at her, eyes empty and glossy, like glass marbles. Her lips parted. I told him not to get on the bus, she whispered. Rosa froze. What? I told him it wasn't for the living. Before Rosa could ask another question, the girl turned away, plugging her ears more firmly with the headphones. Rosa gripped the seat in front of her. The man with the notepad was now watching her. He held up a piece of paper. Don't ask questions. She looked at him, blinking. What is this? He shook his head slowly, his eyes darting to the driver. Then, without another word, he tore the note to pieces and let them fall like ash. The bus kept moving, street after street, wrong corner after wrong corner. Time wasn't passing. Not really. Her phone still said 12:12 a.m., but they'd been riding for what felt like hours. She stood up. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. This time, he smiled. Just barely. A twitch of a grin. Not kind. Not warm. But knowing. You missed my stop, Rosa said, voice steady. He didn't answer. Did you hear me? A low chuckle rolled from the driver's seat. You're on the night bus now, he said finally, his voice gravel and soot. Stops only where the shadows are thick enough to hide you. The engine roared louder. Rosa took a step back. Something was wrong with the windows. They were no longer showing the city. Just streaks of gray and black, like rain running down a mirror that reflected nothing. She turned toward the emergency exit. The handle was rusted. Cold. She pulled. It wouldn't move. Don't, said the man in the trench coat. He stood now too. His face was pale. Shimmering with sweat. Don't try to leave when the bus doesn't want to let go, he said. What is this? Rosa asked. Where are we going? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. A token. Metal. Worn with age, you'll need one of these to get off, he said. Get off where? The next station. It's the only one that still opens for us. Rosa took the token that it was ice cold in her hand. She sat back down. Outside, the buildings were gone, now, only streetlights, but they weren't lights anymore, just hanging bulbs, flickering, like distant stars ready to burn out. The bus slowed. A sign came into view. Sable Station. Transfers only. The doors hissed. Fog rolled in. The air smelled like metal and memory. No one else moved. Go, the man in the coat said. Before it closes. She stepped off. The ground beneath her was cracked, ancient. Trees bent unnaturally, leaning toward her as though listening. A single bench sat under a flickering lamp. On it, a man in a wool sweater looked up. You're early, he said. What is this place? He gestured beside him. A second bench. A new sign. Rain line, for those who wander too far. The other passengers hadn't followed. The bus pulled away, silent, swallowed by the fog, and then, the man smiled. You weren't supposed to get on that bus, were you? She shook her head. No. I was running from something. He nodded slowly. They all are. He stood, leaving something on the bench. Another token. Don't lose this, he said. You'll need it when the real night comes. And with that, he walked into the fog. Rosa. Saturday. The rain slowed, and for the first time all night, the city was quiet, but something deep in her bones whispered, the ride wasn't over. Not yet. The rain hadn't stopped. It was still falling in sheets against the windshield, turning the yellowed glow of the street lamps into smeared halos of gold. The bus rumbled down Sunset Boulevard, its tires sending up waves from the flooded gutters, and inside, the heater hummed a dry, tired tune. The world outside was soaked in a noir haze, a dream fading into dusk, and the city felt like it had secrets tucked in every shadow. Eduardo leaned slightly in his seat. His wet jacket clung to him. Across from him, the girl named Mina hadn't spoken in nearly 10 blocks. She sat watching the fog collect on the windows, her hands folded in her lap, eyes lost somewhere far beyond the dripping glass. Cold? He asked softly. She turned, slowly. Her voice was just above a whisper. No. Just remembering something I wish I could forget. That silence again. Heavy. Not awkward, more like necessary. Like letting the wound breathe. The bus turned past a boarded-up cinema. The marquee still read, now showing, a city that never forgives. Mina's voice came again. I used to work there. Eduardo raised his eyes. I was 17, she said. Summer job. Ticket counter. It smelled like popcorn and mildew. Every night, I'd sneak into the projection booth and watch old films. I thought maybe one day, I'd be in them. She didn't smile when she said it. He didn't answer. Some dreams are like ghosts. You acknowledge them quietly or not at all. A few seats behind, a man in a faded brown trench coat was humming. Eduardo hadn't noticed him bored. The tune was strange, off-kilter, like a lullaby reversed. Mina looked back too. Her lips pressed tight. You know him? Eduardo asked. She shook her head, but didn't look convinced. No. But I've heard that song before. The lights flickered, the driver muttered something and tapped the controls. These damn overheads. Always short in the rain. The bus slowed near a cracked sidewalk where a neon motel sign sputtered and buzzed. No one got on. No one got off. But the humming continued. It was louder now. Eduardo stood, slowly. I'm gonna talk to the driver. Mina reached out and stopped him. Her hand was small and cold. Don't. He paused. Her eyes were wide now. Something's wrong tonight. The humming stopped. They both looked back. The man was gone. The trench coat was still there, folded neatly across the seat, Eduardo exhaled. He couldn't have, but the aisle was empty. He walked toward the coat. Picked it up. Beneath it, a slip of paper. A single word written in black ink, stay. He stared at it, heart ticking faster. Where did he go? Mina asked, standing now. Eduardo turned to the driver. Hey, did someone just get off? The driver glanced back. What are you talking about? There was a man back there. I've been watching the mirrors all night. No one moved. Mina clutched her jacket. I think we missed our stop. Eduardo looked at her. There was no stop. Yes, she said, voice barely audible. Exactly. The driver's voice turned brittle. Where are you two headed? Neither of them answered right away, and the bus didn't stop. Mina gripped the metal bar beside her seat. How long since we passed Echo Park? Eduardo's brow furrowed. At least 15 minutes ago. Mina turned to the driver. You haven't made a stop since then. The driver didn't turn around. There haven't been any. No lights, no passengers, no crosswalks, Eduardo added, scanning the dark street rolling past the windows. Even for LA in the rain, this feels wrong. The driver's shoulders hunched. Sometimes the city stretches at night. Like it forgets where everything belongs. Eduardo leaned forward. What did you say? But the driver didn't answer. Instead, the rain stopped, not slowed, stopped. Like someone hit mute on the weather. The droplets on the windows stilled mid-drip. The wipers swept once, squeaked dry, and then halted. The outside world looked, paused. Mina's breath caught in her throat. Are we still moving? Eduardo pressed his palm to the window. The scenery was still sliding by, but slowly now, like a reel played frame by frame. The buildings outside blurred into one long streak of gray and static. He turned to Mina. I don't think this is a bus anymore. They stood in the aisle, swaying gently, the rumble beneath their feet dull and strange. A soft hiss came from the back of the bus. They spun around. At the very last row, a figure had returned, not the man from before. This one wore all black, coat, hat, and gloves. No face. No features. Just a silhouette where a person should be. As if darkness had taken the shape of a passenger, the figure raised one gloved hand and pointed to Mina. Eduardo stepped between them. Back off. No movement. Then, the lights overhead flickered again, and for a split second, Eduardo saw something not seated at all, but crawling along the ceiling. Limbs too long. Fingers scraping metal. A face made of folds and smoke. Then the lights snapped back to steady. The figure was gone. Mina backed against the wall. I don't think this bus is taking us anywhere we want to go. Eduardo looked at the door. Then we get off. He moved to the front. The doors were sealed shut. No buttons. No handle. The windshield showed no road now, only fog. Endless fog, lit dimly by headlights that seemed to push against nothing. The driver still stared ahead, gripping the wheel like it was all he had left. Open the doors. Eduardo shouted. The driver shook his head. Can't. Not until the bus decides. What? It picks them, the driver said softly. Every few nights. Someone who's lost enough. Hollow enough. Picks them for what? The driver didn't answer. Eduardo turned to Mina. You said you missed your stop. What did you mean? She looked like she hadn't blinked in minutes. My sister. She died in this rain. Years ago. I was supposed to pick her up. Just, never got there. I took the wrong bus. Her voice cracked. It was this bus. Eduardo stepped closer. You've ridden this before? No. Not since that night. Another flicker. This time, the overhead lights didn't return. They were in darkness now, save for the soft green glow of the exit sign above the sealed doors. A low sound, almost like a whisper, began moving down the aisle. A word repeated again and again, growing louder: "Stay. Stay. Stay." Eduardo grabbed the emergency hatch. Pulled. Nothing. The word chanted faster. Mina's face twisted in panic. "Why does it want us?" "Because we didn't let go," Eduardo said, suddenly understanding. "This isn't about dying. It's about being stuck. It's about not knowing when to leave." The bus jolted, lights outside, again. Blurry street signs. The roar of traffic, faint but real. A crosswalk signal flickered red, the doors hissed open, and suddenly the city was back. They stood at the edge of a bus stop. Same bus. Same number. Same sound of distant thunder, but no driver. No other passengers, and the street behind them was empty. Mina took a shaky step onto the sidewalk. Her shoes splashed in a fresh puddle. Eduardo followed. Behind them, the bus doors closed, the engine roared to life, and it drove off, with no one behind the wheel, just the same route, into the rain, disappearing once more into the folds of Los Angeles night. The streets were nearly silent now. Rain misted over the windshield in a fine silver sheet as the city held its breath. The bus rolled through the last turns of its midnight journey, tires cutting slow ribbons through the water pooling along Sunset Boulevard. Each street lamp flickered like a tired heartbeat, alive, but barely. The kind of night that carried ghosts, if you believed in them. And everyone on board the bus, in some way, did. Inside, the silence between passengers wasn't empty anymore. It was saturated. With what? Regret. Unspoken truths. Forgotten names. But there was something else, too, a strange peace, like the calm after a storm. Old Mr. Levin sat in the back, eyes closed. The letter he'd carried all these years rested in his lap now, unread. Maybe forgiveness didn't need to be read to be felt. He'd whispered his late wife's name for the first time in a decade just minutes earlier. That was enough. Sierra, the runaway dancer, had finally stopped shaking. She leaned against the window, watching the city pass like a dream she once wanted to be part of. No more glitter. No more auditions. No more pretending. Just the real rhythm of rain, and in the driver's seat, Daniel. That he had done what he'd never thought he'd do again. That he'd spoken to strangers. To himself. To the night, each passenger had arrived with something heavy. And somehow, mile by mile, those burdens lightened. Not gone, but shared. Understood. They were no longer anonymous souls avoiding each other's eyes. They were people, if only for a moment. Seen. That he pulled the bus to its final stop. Not downtown. Not any route marked on a map. A quiet hill overlooking the basin. Rain still falling, misting the glass. In the distance, the city lights flickered like they were winking out, one memory at a time. You can all get off now, Daniel said softly into the intercom. Or not. Up to you. No one moved. Then one by one, they did. Not rushed. Not startled. Sierra stepped into the rain first, her feet bare. She raised her arms like she could catch the water in her hands. Behind her, Mr. Levin followed, placing the letter into a trash bin without looking back. Others stepped out too, without umbrellas, without plans. That a shared rebirth. Quiet. Gentle. Daniel remained in his seat, engine humming low. Then, footsteps. Someone climbed the steps again. That it was the quiet woman from seat 14. The one who hadn't spoken the entire night. She stood just behind Daniel. You saved us, she said. No, Daniel replied, not turning. I just drove. But you listened. You didn't look away. Daniel breathed deeply, fogging the window. You're staying? She asked. That he finally turned. Someone has to keep the lights on. She smiled softly, then nodded and stepped off the bus. That he watched until every last one of them had disappeared into the rain, figures becoming shadows, then memories. The city was still. His bus was empty. That he pulled the lever, closing the doors with a hiss. The rain played its endless percussion across the glass. In the side mirror, the last flicker of taillights vanished into the black, and Daniel drove again, not toward a destination, not toward an end, but toward another stop, another face, another story waiting in the night. The rainy night bus kept moving. Because sometimes, all you need, is a ride through the storm with someone who doesn't ask why you're crying, and maybe, just maybe, on a rainy Los Angeles night, you'll find exactly who you were meant to be, sure. And so, the rain kept falling. Somewhere, out there in the misty glow of Los Angeles streetlights, a bus hums down a quiet boulevard, empty, except for the faint echo of forgotten footsteps, and maybe a voice, still asking, is this the last stop? Thank you for riding with us tonight on this unforgettable journey through memory, mystery, and shadows. That if this story stirred something in you, if it wrapped around your mind like the fog of a rainy night, then this is just the beginning. Like this video to support more professionally written, high-quality sleep stories. Subscribe to our channel for haunting dramas, emotional journeys, twisted mysteries, and immersive nighttime tales, all crafted to keep you listening until your eyelids drift shut. Hit the notification bell so you're always the first to board the next ride into the unknown. We upload fresh stories weekly, each more unforgettable than the last. That we'd love to hear from you. What do you think really happened on that bus? Drop your theories, your chills, or just a simple, I'm here, in the comments below. We read them all, and don't forget, in a city this big, surrounded by lights, not all shadows come from the dark, not all stories stay on the bus. Coming up next, more rain-soaked tales, more haunted streets, more voices that never fully fade. So lay back, breathe deep, and remember, you're never really alone on a rainy night in Los Angeles.